Yeah.
That's your
Yeah.
name.
Squirrels got me.
Big Jim.
Yeah.
Really, 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 really cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
That's good that you think that of it, because that's what deer hunting typically is cold and fun.
Yesterday morning, I'm glassing up on the pass, and I see these deer moving, and I'm like, ooh, there's deer moving. All of a sudden, I just see this person just head down, just hauling ass, wearing shorts and a t-shirt with a pack on. And I'm like, is that Tard? My dad always talks about floating through the woods like the autumn breeze.
So Robert's
When you're
the ghost, and
275
what's Tard?
pounds, I don't know how you do that, but
The Freightliner? It's just like a creeper. You're just kind of up in the corner watching what's going on down there.
yeah.
You know?
He's like,
He's up there slapping it, pissing all over everything.
is it warm yet?
How did you know the name of the actor?
That's I know.
Why did you say his name?
Hervé Villechaize.
You know what pert near means.
If you know what pert near means and you live in America, you're a redneck too.
Welcome to the Log Talk Podcast, brought to you by Pert Near Outdoors. Hey there, everybody. Billy here, episode 149, Pert Near Outdoors Podcast. Thank you for joining us. So this week we've got an episode where the tables were turned. I got interviewed from one of our friends and listeners, Eric Redder. His buddy Justin jumped on as well. Justin Whirl. I think it's Whirly. We'll call him Whirl. Jay Whirl. The two of them are they're hunting buddies, both relatively new to hunting. And Eric has hit me with a lot of questions. He's trying to learn the area. He's not from New York. So he's really taken to the podcast and the content, learning, what it is to hunt here in upstate New York and Western New York in particular. So Eric hit me with some questions a couple weeks ago, and I said, hey, man, this seems like a great discussion to have on the podcast, so let's get together and let's do it. So that's what we did. Eric asked me questions, asked from his perspective. I gave some answers, so it was a lot of fun to kind of go through some of my tactics and thought process of how I've been having success especially over the last 5-6 years, as I've started wandering around some public land, some bigger woods tracks, getting off the ground that I've always hunted, family land and that. I think it's helping me a lot to develop as a hunter, hunting some of these different places with different landscapes, different hunting pressure, deer densities, things like that. I think it just makes you a better hunter experiencing some of these different things. So we had a really good time with this discussion. I hope you find value in it. I think you will. If you can do me a favor and continue to tell friends about the show, to share on any of your social platforms. If you find an episode is intriguing to you or you learned something, if you could share that, that'd be great. And also on whatever platform you're listening on, give us a rating, whether it is a written review or just a 5-star. That does help, as I guess it helps with the algorithm that we're getting interaction there, and we'll try to get this episode and this podcast put in front of new people. So that's my sales pitch on that end. I haven't talked about it in a long time, but we do have our affiliates that we're working with, and that's one way you can support the podcast financially is if you shop through any of the links that we have in our link tree. So probably the most frequently used is Camel Fire and Cabela's. We've got a affiliate link that we've got getting set up. It was active. They switched their website host, so now it's changing. But if any shopping you do through the HuntWorks, our friends there in East Rochester for tree stands, ground blinds, are now getting heavily into archery gear, bows and arrows. You can go on their website. They've got just about everything you need you can purchase through their website. And if you browse through the link in our browser or in our link tree on Instagram or Facebook, you'll be connected to Pert Near Outdoors, and we will get a little commission on that on the back end. And that's one way you can help us. So keep that in mind when you are doing your shopping for your hunting and outdoor gear. Okay, and then a few housekeeping items here as we get ready for ShedFest tomorrow on the 9th of April at Windy Brew from 12 to 4. We're excited about the event. Things are coming together. If you've been following along, you know we've got a great list of prizes for people who have entered into ShedFest, and to do that, you had to buy a T-shirt. So that's all you had to do was buy the T-shirt from us. You would get the 1-year membership to the Deer Association, as well as an entry into the raffle for all these great prizes. So it's pretty awesome. We've put together quite the collection of prizes, and well over $2,000 of goods will be given away tomorrow at that event. You don't need to be present for the raffle. So if you don't live local, and I know there's a lot of people from outside of the area that entered, that will just get the stuff mailed out to you if you won. But for all you who are coming tomorrow to the event, we're going to have door prizes. So just for being there, you're going to get a ticket that's going to give you an opportunity to pick something off the door prize table. And then we're going to have a couple prizes set up for the best shed side and the best match set. So bring your sheds with you. Hopefully you listen to this or you're following us on Instagram or Facebook and see the story stuff I've been posting there. But bring your sheds from this year, and we'll see. We'll have a little judges panel and pick out our favorites of those two categories, and you'll go home with some prizes for the hard work you put in here this spring finding sheds. We'll have actual raffles there tomorrow at the event as well, so bring some cash. Nothing too crazy. We'll probably have, maybe $30 cash is all you'll need to enter into 2 or 3 of the different raffles. We got tree stands and ground blinds, tree stand and ground blind, and sticks to raffle off. And then we may do another one if there's enough interest from people there. Windy Brew will be doing a food and drink special, so they've got they do pizzas there. So they'll do a pizza. It'll serve a couple people. So a pizza and 2 pints for, I think Russ told me, Christ, I should have these numbers here. I believe he said $18. It might be 17, but I'm going to go on the conservative end and say $18. Normally like $22, so giving a little discount there. So you can actually come and have lunch there and have a couple beers with your friends or your loved one and have a good time. I feel like so if you're not able to make it, we're going to go live with the podcast. We're actually going to do a live podcast. This should be interesting. We'll go live at about 3:30 in the afternoon, as we'll start drawing the winners to the event. So it'll probably be around 3:30, I guess, is when we'll do it. You'll know it'll go live on Facebook or on Bullhorn, wherever you follow us, so you can kind of track along there and listen and engage. So this is going to be fun. Have no idea what to expect. From the interaction I'm getting, I'm thinking we're going to have a pretty good crowd tomorrow. But really, there's not like you have to buy tickets for the event or anything. So I don't know. We could have just the 12 of us, my immediate family and friends, or we could have 100 people. So I'm not quite sure what we're going to have. I hope it's near that 100 number. I'm really hoping to raise some good money here for the Deer Association at the event. And that money, all the proceeds will be going directly to the Upper Genesee chapter, which we've been engaging quite a bit with. Sean Burdick and his team down there doing a great job with that chapter. So that's where the funds are going. So your efforts and coming out and supporting us and supporting the event will ultimately be supporting them. So thank you for the opportunity to do that. We appreciate all of you who have engaged. I'm just blown away the amount of shirts we sold. I've only got, I think as of right now, I've only got 10 shirts left with a mixture of sizes. So if you haven't bought your shirt yet, get them bought. I was thinking about doing a second order, but I think I'm just going to cap it because we're like running up to like almost exactly the perfect number. And I don't really want to have to go through ordering more shirts, and the event's tomorrow. So if you don't get them before tomorrow, whatever there's left, there is left. And you could always buy a shirt afterwards if they're left. But so that's it. So it's all focused on tomorrow. It's all on getting through the day and having a great event. And look forward to seeing you there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you got my number, give me a call or a text, or shoot us a message on social, and we'll interact with you. But special thanks to everybody, all those names on the back of the T-shirt that have supported this event. We greatly appreciate you, and hope that you'll all check out those sponsors, and whether it's their products or their content they're putting out, check it out and support them too. There's a reason why we selected all those folks to try to engage with, because we believe in what they're doing and what their products are. And it's all about helping each other and helping the community. So good stuff there. Enjoy this conversation. Hope you have a great weekend. And keep feeding them.
That's how that works.
Yeah, that's exactly how that works. All right, we're getting things up and rolling here, so bear with us, anybody who's tuning in live. Got a couple bald men here, bald middle-aged men who are losing control of their lives quickly. Did we ever have control? I guess that's the question.
At one point, I did. I lost it.
Wow, that's loud. I'm not going to drink tonight, so I was going to give myself a snack, and then I was rushing because the kids, of course, are late going to bed.
Mm-hmm.
So, is trail mix good for podcasts?
Sounds good here.
Probably not. It's probably not good. Are you nervous? This is your first podcast? Maybe? Second podcast?
No, I'm checking on the app to see if you can get in that way.
You should be able to if he just wants to call in. Just download the Bullhorn app and do her that way.
I'll tell him that. Anyway, how's your night going?
Pretty good. Yeah, the night went well. Kids destroyed the dining room with dinner, as they typically do every night at dinner. Especially if you give them yogurt, they will paint the table with yogurt, and maybe take a bite or two. And then I grabbed Kate and said, "Hey, let's go over to the farm and go for a ride." So we went over and went for a side-by-side ride, and she fell asleep in the side-by-side at 6:45, which is not great because bedtime is usually 7. So is he calling you?
No, it's my mom.
Oh, your mom's calling. You want to talk to your mom? Does your mom want to be on the show?
I don't know if she would know what to say.
Does she know what a podcast is?
I don't suspect she does.
No. She's probably a big Joe Rogan fan, huh? Mama.
You know, I haven't asked her, and of course she's not going to listen to this. At one time, she was a big Andrew Cuomo fan, but that kind of went quiet these last few months.
Yeah, a lot of people went quiet on that, huh?
She lives in Florida. And she was telling me how good our governor was doing.
Well, it looked like he was doing great to start. I mean, I think everybody was like, "Wow, this guy's he's a leader. He's taking the bull by the horns." And
yeah,
that didn't play out all that well, did it?
No, I love her obviously, but that went quiet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I had the same discussion with my wife, and that conversation hasn't come back up since then. So, but
because you chose not to be right, or because
no, there's been a bunch of things that I've been right about that I have not brought back up, and there's like, I think maybe like an unsaid thing going on where she's like, "Okay, yeah, you're right, but I'm not going to give you any credit." So I'm just letting it go. We'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, it's kind of how I'm playing.
Yeah,
with both sides.
It's a smart way to play it. Just play it cool. Let them figure it out. But Uncle Andy's, he might be making a comeback, so watch out for that. Watch out.
We'll see.
We sure will. Well, we've got some people tuned in. If Justin gets on, he gets on. If not, he doesn't, and that's his loss, not ours. And so Eric Redder, welcome to the program. You're a super fan. Facebook tells me anyway, or Instagram says, "Oh, this guy's a super fan," because he listens and he comments and interacts with you, and I appreciate that. I appreciate our Marco Polos in the morning to get our days started and chewing the fat a little bit. So welcome to the program. Appreciate you joining me tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at my business analytics on the account that I run.
Yeah,
I don't have that much super fan engagement. So.
No, you need to create some super fans, all like fake ones, and it could just be bots. They could be Russian. I don't know. You don't know. I don't know what they are. So let's introduce yourself real quick, because I don't think you haven't been on here before. I don't think you.
Not Bullhorn, but we did the thing, the podcast before the Tethered event last summer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so yeah, you were on for that. But for anybody who doesn't know, and what the kind of theme of this discussion is going to be is, well, I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of what it is that has got your gears turning and why we're here to talk tonight. So
yeah,
the floor is yours.
So I live in Orchard Park. my wife's from Western New York here, and so we moved back a couple years ago.
Oh, for God's sakes, Justin.
Yeah, well.
Mute yourself. Jesus. You can't just come in here. Your buddy's trying to give an introduction, heartfelt, and you're just blowing up the spot. We'll get to you in a moment, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so my wife brought us back to Western New York right before the Rona hit, which was perfect timing. We were living in North Carolina, but we live in Orchard Park now, got 2 kids, and I'm a high school teacher. And I guess I'm an adult onset hunter, started in 2017. And so that's been a fun little process, been ate up with it. But then coming to New York has been a whole nother process. And so thank God you guys started your podcast when you did. And in those early days, you know, I think you guys made a big point about doing a podcast for the stuff that you and your family like to do, or guys around here like to do, because it wasn't from Iowa, and it wasn't the Midwest. And, you know, it was a lot of what your family grew up doing and your extended family and friends. And so I was like, perfect. I'm trying to figure this stuff out in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to figure it out specifically here in New York State and Western New York. And so I just followed a lot of your stuff, and we got to chatting, hosted the event. And now when our gears are grinding, we'll send each other polos in the morning.
Yeah.
So
it's nice. It's nice to have that. It's the community. And I think you and I met the first time at that event at Rusty Nickel, correct? Wasn't that where we met, or no? Yeah, actually, you were there.
I don't know if you remember this.
No.
So to get into everything, you know, BHA was coming up hot and heavy when I first started getting into everything down south. And so we helped put on an event and everything. And I was excited. And we hosted this cool event for BHA, and then we moved up here, and I was like, all right, well, let's keep this going. And so you were still pretty active with BHA at the time, and I worked the Western New York Sportsman's show, that expo at Hamburg. And so that was the first time we kind of connected. I think I took over the booth for you, but then I don't know what the event was, but you and Emily were doing something there. And then I went to the Rusty Nickel there in West Seneca,
mm-hmm.
which is right around the corner for me. And then we really started chatting, and then the Rona hit, and now here's where we are.
And that's where you met Justin.
Yeah,
you met Justin at the BHA event.
Yeah.
So I was trying to bring it around, and you were just like, you know,
I'm a novice to this whole thing.
It's all good.
You're doing good steering the ship.
So
that's where he and I connected. So.
I'm the pseudo professional here.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, this is where you take yourself off of mute if you want to say hello.
Hey, what's up?
Not much.
Sorry, no video. Sorry, no nothing. I'm living in a swap house with 20 dudes in Comstock, New York. So.
Oh, that sounds interesting. You are a corrections officer, so let's just get that out there. You know, whatever the vibe that you've got going on with your swap house. That sounds cool.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So, all right. So the gist of Justin, you're a spanking new hunter. So, you know, Eric's got a few years under his belt, but Justin is, you know, smooth as a baby's ass. You are very new into this, correct?
Yeah, pretty close too. I mean, actually, I probably started, you know, as far as getting the hunting out of the way, I think it was probably about the same year Eric did, but nothing here in this state. I only hunted PA with my uncle. So that's where kind of the big woods game kind of, when Eric and I first met, when he was like, where do we go? I said, listen, I got some places we can go, but I don't know shit about them. Let's just go get lost. So we ended up out at Wildlife Management Area.
I'll have to beep that out. Jesus Christ.
Just getting lost, just trying to learn how to do what we do, and me taking the experience from my uncle and how to just walk and look for deer, look for things.
That's the gist of it. It's not really much harder than that. So
yeah, right.
So Eric hit me up, I think yesterday morning, and had a few questions of things that he wanted me to answer. And this is typically the only way that I can long form regurgitate and let things out of my mouth is on the podcast. That's why I do it. So I thought this would be kind of cool. I've never done anything like this where could kind of have you guys ask me questions, and then we can kind of just see where the conversation goes. We'll talk for 45 minutes, whatever flows, and then if anybody who's listening live, if they have anything to throw in, additional questions or comments to it, feel free, and we'll try to hit on those. So let's let her rip.
I know, Eric, you sent questions over towards me, right?
Yeah, there were topics. So I guess the gist of it is, I think it was on my. So I told Justin this story earlier. So it was in 2017. We're watching Sunday Night Football. Cowboys are on. No, just remember it because of that. Cabela's commercial comes on. And I played college soccer, so like competitive person, type A, but no outdoor background, right? Aside from hiking and whatnot. And I'm like, to my wife, I would like to go hunting someday. She's like, you're never going to do that. You're never going to do that. And I was like, watch me. So I go upstairs, go take the hunter safety course. And then she's a veterinarian, reached out to one of her friends at work. And I get put on a cut bean field in December after shooting a rifle for the first time in 2 weeks before. And I dropped 2 deer that night. And I was like, I'm hooked, right? Awesome.
Wow.
Whatever. So then I pick up a bow shortly after that and keep that train going on in North Carolina. And had some fun, had some success, and then come up here. Now, the reason I reached out to you was because gun hunting down south is a lot different. And I can only speak for North Carolina where I was, but, they can bait. I've hunted some of the counties where they run dogs. They have a 12-week rifle season. Their muzzle loader season comes in before their rifle season. So the fervor, the energy, the excitement for opening day, like you would see in PA, like you see in Ohio, like you see here in New York, it's not that they don't like guns. Obviously, they have guns there, but it's not like, oh, we got to go out. It's 3 weeks for rifle or whatever. It's all year. And so I've been trying to sort of adapt, I guess, my game, right, whatever, my style to the Western New York gun hunting culture, what that does to the woods, what that does to the deer, the opportunities which you and your brother and, well, specifically you, Billy, have really taken to since you've kind of run to the big woods. And I think most everybody who gets into hunting typically gets a gun in their hand when they're young, probably on their back 40 in some capacity, and then picks up a bow because they want more challenge or they want to extend the season. I live in the burbs, and so I can sling my bow all year round. And it seems like there's more content out there about bow hunting, whether that's because social media doesn't really like the gun stuff, or it's sort of taboo, or everyone knows it and they don't feel like there's a need to tell everybody what they already know. So I've been searching for, like what you see on the podcasts and the YouTube channels and whatnot related to, I guess, the more active gun hunting. And this is where I guess I'll let Justin take over, because he kind of showed me a little bit of how his family takes to the big woods with guns. And, side note, like I've shot deer out of a tree stand with a gun, which is not that big of a deal. And Justin and I were having this conversation. He's like, I've never been in a tree stand with a gun. And so, we're just trying to blend these styles with what is probably more appropriate in this area or more successful in this area. And, I'm learning. And so I was asking you about that, but I'll let Justin kind of jump in on where he came from with this. And that'll kind of lead into why I asked you the questions I did regarding scouting and tactics and things like that. So.
Yeah. So a couple of things, like Eric was saying with PA, like I've never even been in a tree stand with a gun. I find it to be, I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of times where I sit in what we like to call, the old PA tree stand, which is a couple of rocks underneath a hemlock tree. Really just sitting there for an hour or so and kind of doing a little spot and stalk or, tracking bucks. But he was asking me about that tree stand. I said, I couldn't even tell you. Don't even know what I'd be doing up there.
Yeah. And so, Billy, you've had a lot of success with that. And so for me, I'm sitting here going, okay, what should I really be keying in on on the maps because it's a lot different during gun season. And you got a family, I got a family. I cleared it with the wife this weekend. I'm like, hey, snow's melted in some of these places where there's going to be snow in the big woods. And so I'm going to have to drive a little further, right, from where I live. And I want to go check them out. So what should I look at on the map? Or could you throw me a waypoint so that I can then guess and check and try and find that on the map and then confirm with my eyes and sort of go through that process? And I'm strictly talking for like the gun hunting tactics where you are sitting on a terrain feature, a pinch point, a drainage, some sort of thicket for an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. You've got your cold weather gear, you put it on, and then you pick up and move and you kind of work the next ridge or you work the next point, which are all things I sort of picked up watching you guys and now digging into this. But not having seen that with the guys that kind of, I guess, sort of started me gun hunting. I mean, I shot all my deer out of shooting shacks over corn or over a brush hogged 100-yard lane. So it was like, oh wow, people are going to walk up on you. And I'm not going to say I can speak for all of North Carolina. I'm just saying in my experience down there, guys did not, aside from the dog hunters, they didn't push blocks like they do up here with the ag country. And then also, we had tried to do that. Well, you did that event at one of the properties here in Western New York, sort of the group hunt like you do down in PA. I couldn't go because family, kids, they get you every time. And my son got sick. So actually, no, my son didn't get sick. Someone in his room got sick, so he couldn't go to daycare, which a lot of you guys know about. So I got to miss that opportunity, but that's the sort of style and tactic and scouting I was kind of reaching out to you about, like, hey, what should I really start to be keying in on? Because I tried it a little bit myself this fall, and it was good, but did I sit too long? Did I not give it enough chance? Was I in the right feature? And obviously, the deer's movement patterns from the day, right? Like they're going to get up, they're going to feed, they're going to move. But specifically, when I was going out, I was lucky, I'm a teacher, so I'm going out late season, midweek, when there aren't bodies in the woods pushing deer around, which is something I learned from Justin. And then you and your family have modeled as well. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to go on one of these solo walks by myself, which I often, hunt alone, how should I be breaking down this piece to sort of work my way in? And I work like everyone else. I got a Saturday or a Saturday morning and a Sunday night or whatever. It's not like 4 and 5 days in a row. I mean, I'll take time off, but that's typically during bow season. And I don't know where you are in your stack of deer that you've put down, but I'm like 8-1 that I've put down with my bow versus my gun. So it's very imbalanced. Not the best bow hunter, but I feel like I have an idea of what I should be doing, whereas it seems simple with a gun, but it's like the tactics change because the woods change, and then you throw in the fact that we've now got this late season holiday hunt with the muzzleloader. I didn't own a muzzleloader until this year because, in my opinion, it was 8 days, and it was like, well, I'm just hunting with my bow, right? So a lot of this stuff is new, and I'm specifically speaking from someone who utilizes primarily, almost exclusively, state land. So
So I guess you just kind of asked a whole bunch of questions. So let's start first with, like, are we talking gun season? Is that what you're focused on? Gun season.
Yeah. I'm going to try and get out this weekend and get out to the big woods. And so I want to try and find generalized terrain features on the map, confirm it with my eyes and say, okay, I can replicate this in a new parcel, or I can replicate this in another part of the parcel that I've been to or that I've yet to explore because I've seen this either in the season or now, obviously, in the off season.
Yep. So I would say probably one of the biggest things that I wrote right down as you were kind of going through your question there is where are the other hunters going to be is probably the first thing that I would identify. And you can do that. Is that Justin? Can you mute?
You got it.
Oh, you were good, Eric. If you were unmuted, it was, I think, mainly coming from him. But I think the biggest thing is knowing where other hunters are coming from, so that you can look at the map from home. You're not there, and take yourself off mute, Eric, so we can kind of go back and forth a little bit here.
Okay.
So I've probably been focusing on hunting public. I never hunted public in my life until it was probably 2017-ish, I'm guessing, about when I went out west for the first time. That kind of opened my eyes a little bit to the opportunity we had, and down, in Ontario County and over, Ontario County is mainly where I spend a lot of my time, but over into Livingston as well, and Genesee and a little bit of Wyoming. There's a lot of state land, and that's all within a drive of me, and it's near camp too. So for me, I'm looking at that and saying, wow, like, look at all of this extra opportunity that there is, that, I don't have to get burnt out on my spots that are at camp, that the other, on any given weekend, there could be 7 or 8 guys trying to hunt the same piece of property at our place. And that gets burnt out real quick, So as I started looking, I really didn't have much of a formula how I was going at these public land pieces. I was really just going out there with tag in hand and not really being too picky about what I was going to shoot. So a lot, happenstance, I've killed a bunch of deer, a lot of does. I go, a lot of times I'm just looking to kill does when I go to public, and I think that's a big piece. It's like, what are you trying to get out of it? If you're listening to this and you're solely focused on big bucks, you may be looking at some different things. You might, want to, I think we all have the desire to shoot a big mature buck, but at the end of the day, if I get an opportunity at a decent buck, or if I get opportunities at does and I have doe tags in my pocket, I'm probably just going to pull the trigger, because you just don't have that many opportunities that present themselves throughout the season. So coming back around, so I would say, starting off right away, look at that piece of property, and every piece is going to be a little bit different depending on the shape, the size, what's on the borders. Do you have a road on a border, like a actual main road? Where are the access points for people? So let's just say this. So you're looking at a rectangular piece.
Well, the general piece I'm looking at. So without saying it, you can, and we've talked about it a little bit, but
so you're looking at a big wooded piece of public land.
Yeah.
You've got an actual, like, a county road on one side. So you've got a whole one side of that is covered by a road, and the property ends there. Let's say you got a couple access points and you've got private land all the way around it. So what I've really started looking at over the last couple of years is going on to, you can do it on onX, Google Earth. There's some really good imagery on Google Earth, and you can kind of go to different times of the year where you can see it without leaves on, with leaves on. But without leaves on, you can see where the hunting camps are. And typically around all these public land pieces, you've got these small parcels of land. They might be 10 or 15 acres, if that. And there's usually some sort of a cabin or a dwelling or a trailer or something on that piece of property. And those people, a lot of times, are coming in to hunt the public land, not necessarily their property. So as you start to look at where that pressure is coming from, then you can kind of start to put the pieces together about, okay, if that's where the people are coming in gun season we're talking, and this is really how I've drawn up my formula, my success on opening day the last 3 years. The first year I hunted the piece of property that I've done 4 years now. The first year I shot a doe right at dark, but I was blown away by the amount of hunting pressure that there was coming from the private onto the public. It completely surprised me. But that experience drove me to, like, have an awakening and say, okay, I need to be aware of where these people are coming from, because on those popular hunting days, the first weekend, Thanksgiving, the first Saturday after opening day, like, those are the biggies where you get a lot of people. They're taking time off. They're off for the holiday, and they are going to be on their feet moving deer. A lot of people are not, sitting there in their tree stand for 8 hours during gun season for that one opportunity at that one buck. They want to get out and get on the ground and move, and that's the culture we have here, which, quite frankly, I love. That's what I love about gun season is, if you're going to sit on those pile of rocks underneath that hemlock tree, like Justin said, and the rest of the time be on the move and trying to make something happen. So that's the first thing I would do. Now, looking back at some of the experiences that I've had, is if you're interested in a piece of property, take a look at what's going on around it and how you're going to get into it access-wise personally, but also how other people would be accessing it as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess, you've developed your system, right? You have a system for bow hunting, whether it's gear, climbing system. That's obviously really popular. There's a lot of that out there. So from my point of view, and Justin's, like, that was really easy for us to sort of navigate and tackle, right? Figure out what you want, what you need, time of year, all that. I guess, could you elaborate your system in terms of the clothing and not the pack, but like your philosophy is like, I'm going to get to this feature, right? I'm going to layer back up and I'm going to give it an hour or 2 hours. And then I'm going to work this next point. Cause I think that's the big thing I'm struggling with, because, we always talk about, and again, I'm framing it from the bow season, right? We're going to go find the hot sign. We're going to check our camera. We're going to, see what activity's been there, whether it's hunter sign or it's is a new trail coming, is a scrape open, whatever. And we all know that from bow season. Like, that's easy to measure and see. But with the gun season, like, you're not obviously going down to the spot where they're going to cross, right? You're staying above it. And you're saying, historically, this is what I've seen. So I'm going to give it an hour. Or I know the cliche, guys get out of the woods at 10 o'clock. So
right.
I want to be set up in these points. And that's what I'm looking for, just to kind of discuss, like, what are those points you want to be at when guys are going to clear out of the woods, go get a coffee, go get a sandwich type deal, and also re-enter in the evening. Those are the little things, the nuances that I haven't put enough time into thinking about, because the tactics as well as even the weapons, right? Muzzleloader has been new to me. So it hasn't been at the forefront of my mind, whereas the tactics ambush-wise from a bow standpoint have been. So they don't always line up one for one.
No, and I don't think there's a perfect answer to this, Eric, and I think sometimes, listening to all these podcasts and taking in all this content, people can just make this way more difficult than it needs to be. And I think if you can get yourself those hunts in the woods, like this one particular spot that I've come to love the last 4 seasons, I've had 3 successful opening days in the same, I've had 2 successful opening days in the same spot, and the 2 opening days prior, I hunted above this spot, and I saw a lot of activity down in this area, down over the crest of the hill, just kind of out of sight, right on the edge of hardwoods and hemlocks. And there's a geographic feature behind me that is a barrier for anything to come from behind me. So, it took me 2 years, and like probably not exaggerating, probably 8 to 10 times of just hiking and scouting and walking and hunting, and probably more than that in all reality. Spent a lot of time in that area until I found a spot that I liked, and then I didn't know that it was a great spot until I actually hunted it. And the first time I ever sat there was opening day 2020, and that's when I shot my buck and I shot the doe an hour later, and I was like, holy shit, this is a good spot. Like, the movement, all the deer are coming to me. And I ran the play. I ran the play again this year, and just, it was the luck of the way it worked. I just didn't have any bucks come in, but I had the exact same play out right around the same time, 7:30, 7:45. Here come the deer, because whether it's guys are finally making their move, they sat for the first hour and they got antsy and got down, whatever that is. But it took me a lot of time to figure that out, and I never could have done that unless I put hunts in there and I put boots on the ground throughout the entire year, just walking around trying to put things together. But I will tell you one cool thing is that this spot, I'm within maybe 80 yards of it, but my dad and I were hiking up there one winter. I don't know, it could have been winter of 19, maybe it was winter of 20, but we were doing a snowshoe hike in this area, and we found right on the edge of this drop off, this geographic feature, drops off into a ravine. Right on the edge of that, it's where the hemlocks start, and then you got this hardwood kind of ridge that runs up to the high point of the hill, and it's all hardwood, mainly oak, but maple. So on a year where there's a lot of acorns, there's a shitload of food there, and there's a very distinct travel. I mean, there's deer trails pounded down, there's buck rubs everywhere, but there was an old permanent tree stand that somebody had up there, and like made a mental note of that. And then I think that was the winter of 2020, and then I kind of found myself hanging around that area throughout the spring and summer trying to figure out where I wanted to be. Finally picked a tree to stand next to, and it's literally just a big, I think it's a big oak tree where there's two of them right next to each other, and there's a steep downward slope behind me, and I just dug with my feet into the ground, a flat spot, so I could stand on it, and I just stand there. I don't sit, I don't do anything. I just stand behind the tree, and there's literally nothing that could ever see me because they can't come from behind me without me hearing them because they make a shitload of noise coming up the ravine, and as long as the wind is pulling down or blowing really anywhere other than straight out in front of me from my back, like I'm totally hidden. But it took me a lot of time to find that. And the downside of it is that it takes it's a mile and a half, maybe a little more, but we'll just say a mile and a half, but it's a straight vertical climb for a mile to get there, and then you drop down a little bit to come back down into that spot. But gear is vitally important to that, because you're never going to, if you try to walk up there with your bibs on and you're in your big heavy jacket, I've seen it done, and it's not pretty, because guys are literally sweating their asses off less than 5 minutes from the truck because you go straight up the hill. So you kind of, before I go too far down that gear end, did I kind of answer your question about as far as finding the spot and figuring that out there? I'm not sure if I'm hitting that exactly for you or not.
Yeah, and I mean, this is where I think it's valuable for Justin to jump in, because he really took me on my first big woods foray 2 years ago. We went down to PA, and it was similar tactics, but we were more mobile, and so I guess that was my frame of reference. And I guess it's valuable for him to come in and kind of explain where and why he does that and who he learned that from, and maybe you can jump in and give feedback on that, because they're similar tactics but a little different if you think about it.
I really think the only reason, so yeah, absolutely similar tactics, but I think the only reason you're thinking it's a little different here is that it was cold and wet and rainy, and how terrible was that weather in the short amount of time we had to get there. I mean, when you think about that point that we had sat on and that little feature down to that flat, I mean, that was hemlocks to your left, big hard timber to the right, working off the other side of that point. And that's where, I caught that buck, what was it, a week before or whatever, moving from those hemlocks into that big hardwood feature. And then just sometimes it calls to be a little bit more mobile when that weather is pounding on you like that. I mean, the best spot we found of the day was underneath that big giant cluster of hemlock trees when we weren't getting wet, right?
Yeah, and in our defense, right, he's like, hey, grab a PA tag, come on down with me. And I'm like, well, all right, well, what's this all about? Do we get a doe tag with it? Because, I mean, I've hunted Kentucky, you get doe tags with it. North Carolina, you get your doe tags with it. New York, you get your doe tags or either sex with it. He's like, no, I'm going to shoot does. I'm like, really? So we're on this point, and someone kicked something up from the valley below us, and I don't know, 10 or 12 does run by, and I'm like, come on now. Like, I'll shoot anything just as much as you guys will, especially on an out-of-state hunt like that when you're wanting to have fun, the first time in the area. But no, to his point, like, the weather was a little bit different that day. So again, I'm only comparing it to that like little weekend spurt we had there. It just seemed like we were a lot more active and mobile. And actually one of the hunters in our party, through our movement off of a laurel patch, ended up dropping a nice buck. So, going back to that idea of like, where do they want to be? Where are the other hunters going to be? We were on a gas well line, and I think we kicked him up out of that laurel patch was he running back to your uncle and your cousin, Justin? I don't remember that, but I know he died in front of us.
Yeah, from what I remember, that deer died right in front of us. But we had dropped in on top of them through the laurel, and when they had cut off across the face of that big hill we were on the edge of the laurel, that buck had just walked out in front of them. So I have no doubt that in 40 minutes that buck got up, moved his way through there, and we moved him.
Yeah, and so Pennsylvania, one of the big differences I see with PA is that, there are some smaller blocks of public land, but most of it is just some massive expanses of huge big woods. And that's different than what we have here. We have a little bit of that in New York. If you go in the Catskills or the Adirondacks and, going in one direction, like if you go to as long as you want, but it's a freaking bear, and at some point you're going to get cliffed out. Like it's a different game there. But you go to most of these pieces around, we'll just say downstate New York, anywhere south of the Adirondacks, minus the Catskills, they're not huge pieces of property. So you're going to be dealing with pressure, especially during gun season. And the big piece that I was just thinking when you guys were kind of responding to my last answer is that everything changes the minute that first gunshot rings out on opening day of gun season here in New York. And that's the deal. Like if you have a, like let's take our situation at the farm here, we do not push. We do not walk around. We go to stands. We sit. We do not, they used to push a lot. We don't push anymore. And that's just because we prefer to, not pressure the deer. That's how we hunt here. We do have some opportunity, but really our goal, but if we get to gun season and nobody has shot one of our bigger bucks during archery, then we're okay if they make it till late gun, because we want to give those deer a sanctuary so that they can come to our property and eat our food and enjoy our cover that we have and kind of survive the rest of the season. But you go to public land or most pieces of property around our region here in Western New York, I mean, it's getting hammered. It could be getting hunted 7 days a week. The deer don't have a break. So as soon as that gun season starts, in my opinion, maybe if it's a decent weather day or there's a lot of pressure in the woods and you might be able to be in one of those prime pinch points, it might be worth your time to sit for a while, or the last hour of light, if you're hunting. I mean, I've had some good success on public, shooting does, just kind of getting to a good spot and, moving midday, getting to a spot on the outside of bedding on the downwind side of it, and just kind of letting the does kind of funnel out at the end of the night. I've had success that way. But the chances that a buck just slinking from a patch of hemlock through the hardwoods, it's just not going to happen. I mean, it can happen, but he probably got bumped and he's probably trying to get out of there. And that's the reason why you're seeing him. You might see some late rutting activity, and that's just my experience. You just do not see them just wandering around. There's a reason why they're on the move in the daylight hours. And that's the thing, and I'm sure you've seen it, Eric and Justin, you guys go scout some of these pieces in these big, beautiful, wide open side hills where there's benches and terraces, and you find this sign that you just fall in love with. Like, oh my God, look at this rub line. I can see it for 200 yards. I can see a freaking giant rub all the way down there on some tree, That's made at night. And once you can come to terms with that, all of a sudden, like, the property shrinks. Like all the people that we listen to, we all listen to a lot of the same podcasts and some of the same content, but it is so true, is that 90% of the movement happens on 10% of the land. And that's something that I've heard that said. I think I've heard the Hal Blood say that. And, there's maybe nobody more decorated in big woods hunting than Hal Blood. And, when he says something like that, it kind of makes you take a step back and think about it in your experiences, and it's freaking spot on. And then you go to those 10% areas that you can find on a map, whether it be hemlocks or you can kind of see a change in vegetation, some sort of an edge. But a lot of that, unless it's hemlocks, it's actually pretty hard you really can't see that. You can assume, but you can't see it till you put boots on the ground. So,
And that's where I'm going with the whole scouting piece is, it's easy, right, on paper and over a beer to talk about how to scout these big woods from an archery standpoint, because you kind of know, but like you said, once those first gunshots ring out, it's like, okay, now you take in those extra variables. And then you also throw in, like, did we get an early snow? Do we have a late snow? What are temps doing? And then, again, going back to the additional opportunity we got this year with the holiday hunt, you throw in those extended days coupled with, like, I don't know how many people are taking out their kids for muzzleloader if it's not on private land. So it's like I'm thinking about how to balance all of that with what I've seen, with what I've scouted, with what I've discussed with you and other people and what I've heard. And it's like, okay, what should I do with my time? Because we've got a family, we got things going on. And it's like, I want to make it valuable. And you're not going to hit every time. I got a great session on Monday. Landed a bunch of good sign on 10% of a block, like you talked to, or 10% of a unit. After work, and I was like, yep, this is where they all are, and it was clear as day. And you leave that 10% and you're like, all right, it's a ghost town.
Yep.
So my eyes are becoming more trained to that from a map standpoint and a boots on the ground standpoint. I guess it was just more or less like, I know you have a lot of confidence in going to a new block or stretching your legs and exploring, but what is the thing or things that you're keying in on, especially when you and your brother or you yourself have taken off a midday or a midweek or a half day and said, like, I'm going to make the most out of it and I'm targeting this. And we've shared waypoints, right? Like, I'm not going to bring those up specifically, but like, if you could articulate what those are, because I'm trying to refocus my brain on that. Because I guess I was doing more bow hunting scouting this week, and now I'm going to gun hunting big woods type of scouting. And so that's where I'm going to try and focus my weekend. Yeah. Assuming family doesn't blow it up,
Yeah. For me, if I'm trying to do that and I'm trying to hit a piece of woods confidently and just go at it with all intent of walking out of there with a deer, it's attacking a side hill or something that's got like a defined bench. So I'm thinking of two different places, one of which I think I've essentially shown you both of them. One of them has a great big river that runs through it. And there's spots that if I know there's a trail that's on a bench, a hiking trail, it's on a bench. And I know that there's points that I want to hit. I want to check those points. If you have snow on the ground, even better, because you can tell if those deer have been going up and down the hill. And typically that's how you see movement, at least in a lot of these areas. You'll see deer movement up and down the hill morning and night. And then a lot of times they're bedding down on these benches, right below these. So it's like my favorite way to gun hunt is to be in an area where I can motor and I can, go out and walk up and peek over these edges and look down over. So I'm on a bench, or it could be a logging road that's cut into the side hill, and you can stay close to the inside of the hill so that the deer, if they are below you, you can walk quietly and you can stay hidden, and then you can walk up to the edge, peek over. And I mean, I learned that tactic from my dad and from my uncles. That's how we hunt at camp with a gun, because we have, we have a hill that we hunt on, and there's a big logging road that runs up the side of the hill that's on an angle, and that you have all of these vantage points where you can pop over. And it is such a great tactic because you can cover ground. You're not wasting time. If you try to sit in one spot, if the deer aren't moving, they aren't moving, you're not going to see anything. So you can, bang, 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 hit all these spots. Like probably the number one hunt that comes back to me is that one I said it a couple of years ago. I knew I had like 2.5 hours, and I had a couple points I wanted to hit that were like 1.5 miles from the truck. And I was hauling ass through the woods, just going from point A to point B, got to a spot. There was fresh tracks going downhill, but the deer weren't there. So I had to start backtracking because I had time that I had to be back home by 5. And I just did my loop back, went to the next finger, went out that finger, looked, Sure enough, the deer were right there. They busted up on me, and I shot one of the does and dumped her right there. And it seemed simple, but when you take the step back and you look at it, those spots, if it's not that exact same spot, it's the same topography, it's the same setup with a bench and then a drop off, and then typically some sort of knobs and benches below that where the deer are bedded. So you can go and you can be super aggressive. If you're not picky and you're looking to just go out and fill the freezer, which is me and a lot of my friends and family, we're looking to go out and kill deer. That's what we love to do. We love to fill our freezers so we can eat the rest of the year. If you can shoot a big buck, that's a freaking bonus. But those are, doe hunting, like you could do a whole podcast on doe hunting because I feel like there's that never gets talked about. And to your point, nobody talks about gun hunting tactics and nobody talks about how they do it, but it can be so much fun and you don't have to sit in the same spot. You can go, and if you bump them, that's the beautiful part about public land. Who cares? I bumped them. I'll just keep going. I'll find some more, or I'll double back and I'll go do something else, and they might circle back around a little bit later and get another chance at them. But that's kind of how I run mine. Is I like to focus on side hills and focus on drop-offs, benches, ravines, anything that's a kind of a dramatic topographical, that's the word, change that I can hunt. It's pretty boring hunting flat farmland, let's be honest. You can basically look at it and say, okay, there's the one block of woods in 5 square miles. That's where the deer are bedded, so just hunt around that. Total different game when you're hunting these pieces that have got side hills and topography. So go have fun, tear it up. If you bump something, who cares? Just mental note it, and you can come back, and chances are the deer were there for a reason, and they escaped, and they're happy because they did so, and you could probably kill them there next time.
I guess I need to contextualize something because this is awesome, Billy, and I appreciate this. I'm by no means saying, all right, Billy, give me your playbook. It's my personal learning that I'm trying to make sense of, coming from, a place of not doing it that often with a gun, and then not having, you guys on your podcast last week or whatever said, in your grind group, you grinded, you're processing 46 or whatever deer. And so that hunting heritage to me is just so cool. And as you alluded to on your property, you learned about that from your dad and your uncle. So then you try and seek this information out. And it's like, this is the only podcast, obviously, we're local and we have a connection, but that I've ever come across that really puts that at the forefront, the gun hunting culture, the tactics, sort of the fun with it. And we all want to shoot a big buck. That's great. It's fun. I've done that. I love it. And I strive to do it with whatever weapon, but I'm getting a lot of value out of learning on my own and then bouncing ideas off of you and Justin and other guys who've done it more than I have, because it does provide so much opportunity. And the places that you're referencing do have a plentiful amount of, game-rich environments, right? There's a ton of does in there. If that's what I'll do that any day of the week,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think people miss out so much on all of this by, if you are a new hunter and you digest a ton of this content, you just get paralyzed on this idea that you have to hunt mature bucks and you got to be on the ridges and hunting sign. It's that's fun for 2 weeks, maybe, if that, maybe 5-6 hunts. The rest of it is what are we doing, guys? Let's hunt together. Let's get 3 or 4 of us together, one of us together. I absolutely love my solo hunts, but it's the getting together with a few people and going and strategically going at a piece of property, whether it be private or public, and just going at it together and knowing where each other are. And, a lot of times, we'll sit for the first hour. I did that quite a bit. We've done that quite a bit forever. That's always been a gun hunting tactic for our family is, you sit for the first hour, but you have a canned plan. As long as nobody gets something or something happens that changes that, that, I'm set up here. My buddy Jeff is here. Jimmy's here. When those guys are ready. You know, I'll use an example. This year, I went to that spot I was talking about. That's my opening day spot the last 2 years. The last 2 years I've hunted this exact same tree, had the success. So this year, it was the first Saturday after Thanksgiving. I wanted to go back into this spot because I was kind of bummed I didn't see a buck in there yet. And I was like, well, this could be another day where we've got some high hunting pressure. But anyway, Jimmy actually still hunted the entire hill up to me. So it took him probably 2.5, 3 hours to still hunt to me. He saw some deer, he moved some things around, but that's an awesome tactic is if you know you want to go sit somewhere and sit for the first hour and a half or 2 hours, have somebody, if you're hunting with somebody, have them still hunt to you. And then he got to me and we said, okay, my game plan was I was going to drop down in this ravine. I'll work this ravine up, and then you go back and drop down here to the other side of this ridge, and let's hunt it south. We'll hunt it, 300-400 yards, 500 yards away from each other. We'll hunt it south to Jeff, and then the three of us will line up, and we'll hunt our way back down the hill back to the vehicles. And there's a whole morning hunt, and you're covering a ton of ground. You're seeing a lot of things. You're seeing sign. So even if you don't kill something, it's not a loss. You're not losing anything. Incredibly valuable. And I want to hit something with access that I was listening to Antler Up podcast today. They had Tom Runskevich on, and Tom's an awesome dude. Got to meet him last year at the Total Archery Challenge, and they were talking about.
You're going to that, right? Like you were.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was supposed to register
Making sure.
I was just thinking tonight, depending on how life is going, it might be fun just to go down there take a ride down and go down there for a night and hang out with everybody, come back the next day. But that's a whole separate conversation. Because I miss, those guys are awesome. The time is fun. I don't even care if I take my bow. I just like to go.
Hence why you registered, right?
Yeah, no, right. I didn't. Yeah. So, but one of the things that Tom was talking about was access, because, they were talking public land and tactics and how to handle that. My thought with a couple of these areas that I guess it's almost every piece of public that I hunt. My thought process on access is I want to use the trail that the deer expect me to use to get in there. Most of these pieces have a hiking trail. They have a main parking area. Now, there are situations where I have gone in kind of off the beaten path because of the wind or what's going on or where I suspect the deer movement's going to be. If it's the rut, maybe a little bit more predictable where the deer are going to be hanging and moving. But I love just taking that main hiking trail and just blazing up that trail like I'm a hiker and getting to the point that I need to get to. If I need to go past it and loop around because of the wind, keeping that in mind. But the deer are used to human activity on those trails. It's not uncomfortable to them. I mean, you can be in there during deer season and have hikers just walking right by you. Be nice to them, by the way. Don't be dicks, because it's trailhead diplomacy is a beautiful thing, because people, no quicker way to get somebody to turn on you as a hunter than being a chauvinist or some sort of a dick on the trail, being rude to somebody. But I digress. Access, I think, is a huge piece too. So you asked the question, like, how are you figuring out where to focus? Access is a huge piece, but don't overthink access. Because if it's a heavily used area, heavily recreated, I think you can use the same way that everybody else is using it and just act like you're a regular old person. Just walk. Don't sneak. Don't do nothing. Just get from point A to point B, and don't worry about anything in between.
Yeah, I mean, that piece that that I was on this year, that happened twice, and right at first sight, I could have shot something, and then in the afternoon, I didn't know where anyone else was, and I hadn't been on that piece ever, and so I didn't know what was beyond my target, and so I'm not upset that I didn't shoot at anything, because you can't ever rechamber that round. But it's like, man, if I can replay that again this year, knowing what I knew and now knowing what the backdrop is, and okay, if I don't see a car here, then I shouldn't suspect somebody. So hindsight's 20/20, but yeah, obviously it's better not to pull the trigger than do it in that situation. But I was on the paths that you said, and it was like, you serious? Like, you know what I mean? It was like, this is gonna be a great day.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
It was an awesome day. But I totally agree with that point. I don't know if Justin, you have anything. I was gonna say, you were reading some stuff down, Bill.
That's a great point, Bill, and I like that. I guess my question is, what really takes you off the path? Because I seem to find myself doing that a lot, where I'll walk in on that just hiking trail, move. But then I seem to fight myself all the time on what really is going to take me off the trail. Are you just following your point, saying, I'm going to move down to this point, no matter when I get there, I'm going to drop into this? Or are you finding sign, crossing that trail, and then taking yourself in that direction? Because I always seem to fight myself in an inner battle of, keep going to where you want to go, or should I follow these tracks and drop off in the side and start to get myself into it?
That's a great question. I guess it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to just move and hunt and scout, and you're not, if it's like the prime conditions and it's quiet, the ground is wet, or you've got snow, you're in killer mode. Like, that you are on the move, and it's a very good opportunity that you could see the deer before they see you, and you could get a shot. Now, if it's loud, if it's a day where you're just out there just to be out there and enjoying your time, a lot of times I'll find myself, there's some cool sign. There's a rub line. There's a heavily used trail. I'll kind of just follow deer sign. But that's a really unique question, because a lot of times what I kind of guess I'm doing it without thinking about it is I'm always wanting to get to a point where I can be above the deer. So if I'm on a hiking trail or on a logging road that's going up the hill, if I see, it benches off and there's a defined bench that I can get on, that I can be above the deer where they may be bedding, that's where I want to be, because I want to have that predator's advantage of being able to look down on them and have my ability to see them before they see me. And that's exactly like, I just am thinking of two deer I shot this year that was the exact situation. I went down to Allegheny County and I shot that deer a few hours into my hunt there, and I had no reservation of where I was going, had no idea. I was just kind of following. There was a little bit of snow on the ground. I was following fresh tracks, and what I ended up doing was I was kind of circling around the top of this kind of bowled out area, and there was a stream that came down it. So I was following these tracks, and I hit the stream, and there was kind of a defined edge there of the stream where there was some thick brush. And I worked my way, I kind of just left the tracks and I worked my way up the stream. And I didn't really think about this, but now as you kind of bring this up, this was kind of my thought process must have been that I wanted to get up above them, because it was loud, it was crunchy. There was a little bit of snow, but it was loud and crunchy and quiet. So there was no way I was going to sneak up on them from the same level, because, they could smell me, but they certainly were going to see me or hear me before I was going to get a chance at them. So I looped up above. And by the time I got up above, sure enough, I came across deer tracks that were dropping down the hill. But they were dropping down on an angle. So instead of just getting on those deer tracks and following those deer tracks, were they going straight down? I'm trying to think, because this matters to this story. I think the deer tracks were coming. They were going on an angle. Okay, so instead of following the deer tracks down onto this hemlock side hill, I doubled back and I dropped down to kind of what I could visually see was that a little bit of that bench on that side hill. So I looped around and I got maybe 80 to 100 yards back from those tracks that went onto that side hill, and I got down to their level, and then I kind of started sneaking my way in, and sure as shit, I came across their tracks, and maybe as soon as I came to their tracks, it was maybe 25, 30 yards. I bumped those deer and they went uphill, but they didn't spook like badly. They didn't know what I was. They heard me, but because I was at the same level they were with all of the timber and the hemlock, it was real thick. They didn't know what I was. They just knew that something spooked them. They ran up the hill. They stopped 80 yards away and looked down the hill at me. And I kind of let it all play out. They spooked and ran up the hill. And ended up being, I shot a button buck. I thought it was a doe. I shot a button buck. So probably why I didn't run away, because it was too dumb to run away. But that deer, it came to check out and see what was going on. I ended up shooting it right there. But I wanted to get above that. The theory of that whole story is that I wanted to get above where the deer could be. I hit sign, and then you play out play out that situation with the sign. And then with the buck I shot this year down in Pennsylvania, I wanted to stay high. You know, I could have gone directly to the point that I wanted to be at. I could have gone as a crow flies, which would have been a lot quicker than walking all the way around and out that finger ridge that ran out above that side hill that I wanted to be looking down on that nice bench where my buck was bedded. But I took the longer route. I stayed high because I wanted to stay quiet and stay high. So I had the advantage with that snow on the ground. And I popped my head over the hill, and I wasn't 15 yards down the hill sneaking to get to my spot where I wanted to be, where I knew I wanted to be. And sure as shit, the deer's laying right there. I mean, it's pure luck, right place, right time. But the access into that spot, I could have done it 20 different ways, and I would have blown that deer out, maybe even never even known that deer was there. But coming into it is, I guess that's what I do. I guess that's my approach to things, is I always want to kind of, whatever advantage I can have with that topography, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and I enjoy hearing that answer, because I think that's definitely an inner struggle that I have. I say it to Eric all the time when we're walking next to each other, heading up a trail or what have you. I always look at him and say, I don't think we should drop off yet, or should we drop? You know, I always ask the question. So it's good to hear your side of that, because that'll add another layer into, will this take me into this direction where I feel like I should be? That's a good, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good to just go with your gut and follow it. And if you bump that deer, like I said, it's not that big of a deal. That's mental note. You know, a lot of times if you don't go investigate, you're always wondering what's over the next ridge or what's over the other side there that I can't see. So, you know, there's value in wandering a little bit, even if it doesn't work out. You know, you're covering that ground. But I love staying high. Stay high. High is, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something I could tagline, but I can't. I can't think of anything. But
don't get yourself lost a bit.
No.
I'm out in Adirondacks now, like I was saying, so I'm out in Comstock. And I'll tell you what, this is a different world out here, even from Western New York, trying to navigate this place and this game. With turkey season coming, I don't even know where to begin. There's not a single piece of agriculture out here, so this should be a fun game tomorrow.
You going turkey hunting tomorrow, early season?
No. So I'll be out. I'm trying to just scout, get on birds.
Nice.
With me being out here, like I was saying, I'm living in a swap house now, but I bought a 33-foot camper trailer, and it's got a seasonal site out here in Lake Luzerne.
Oh, nice.
Next to some big forest preserve land. So I've been out I was home for 8 days, but I was here on a 10-day stretch. I'm here for a couple days now where I'm off. So tomorrow morning, the plan is to get out and start glassing some of these things. Hopefully with a little bit of rain, I can bring them out into some open area. But if anything, I took a little page out of my uncle's book. I'm just going to walk these trails, find a gated road, walk that road, do my best to find any sort of sign, because it's too early for goblin. So just to find any sort of sign to know if there's turkeys there, because this is some needle in a haystack stuff out here.
Yeah, but it's really easy right now to see where the turkeys are feeding. They're making a complete mess of the forest floor as they're picking around and stuff. So when I was out, I went for a quick walk this afternoon on my way home, and I mean, there was like areas that were all scratched up, turkey shit around. So, look for some of those areas where when I've been in the Adirondacks, we were bear hunting, but the turkey sign that we had seen a couple of years ago was all like top third of the hill, and there was a lot of beech and I guess it was mainly beech on those points up there, on those high points. So I'm just looking. I didn't realize where Comstock was. You're in a sweet spot there. You can be in Vermont in no time too. You're right there on the border.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm excited for the opportunities out here to really get into it. But again, getting some notes, picking some brains of yourself, my uncle, in regards to even where to start. Because like I said, it is, when you're flying solo out here, it's for some needle in a haystack stuff, really paying attention to the topo, really paying attention to the way these animals will want to move, and even just trying to find a starting point. So access is big out here. It's not it's not the easiest, that's for sure. But trying to find a starting point right now, which put me into my question that I just asked you about, should I jump off? Should I stay on? I think right now is going to be about covering as much ground as humanly possible, though.
It's the name of the game.
So I had a hard pivot, and I sent both of you guys this in a text because I know we're coming up on time. I assume maybe your uncles and your dad did. I don't really think I've ever heard you talk about it, or many guys around here talk about it. But thoughts on, say, like a lever action with iron sights versus, like a 308 or a 30-06 or whatever. Because thinking back on my past experience, there's times when we've all had it, like you're either powered up too high or you're powered down, and you're trying to find them in the scope, especially when there's a little bit of movement, but it's inside 100. Have you ever given a thought to running a 30-30 or anything like that? You're just straight sending it long.
Have you ever shot at a deer at 100 yards in the woods with iron sights?
I have not. I've shot at targets.
It sucks ass.
Oh, listen, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here saying I'm a marksman.
No.
I'm wondering. I'm saying inside 100. I'm looking at scenarios where they're not startled, or they kick up and, like you say, they run however far it is. And again, it's a firearms question because that's again not my background. So I'm just asking.
My answer to that is I'm not there yet. I love having and I don't think like my cousin Joe and Dave, like they're both pretty eclectic kids. They love the whole like doing it the hard way. So they both have lever action Marlins, and they love it, and it's fun. But they don't, if you've got a deer bedded at 100 yards and you only have a shot at its head, you can't make that shot with that gun. And that's the part of hunting that I love. I love the precision side of shooting my rifle, and I can't imagine if it was mandatory, like with muzzleloader going to Colorado, you can't have a scope, and that's just the end of the day. So you do what you got to do with iron sights. But if I can have a scope on my gun for the deer's sake and for my sake, I want to have the most lethal weapon I can, so that when I shoot, if I'm on, like I hope I am, they're not going anywhere. So me personally, I'm a big scope guy. Most of my family, as I think about it, most of them are scope as well. I have a couple, like I said, my cousin Joe and Dave, which is my Uncle Chris's boys, they use iron sights. And now that as I'm talking through this, my Uncle Chris is a Marine, and he is a very good shot with iron sights. So he's a big proponent of shooting. He has a 12 gauge that he uses still to this day that's iron sights, and he loves that. But then I like, this is great because I'm kind of fleshing this out. When it comes to hunting where you're doing a lot of deer drives, and you're going to be shooting at running deer, because that's just what happens on deer drives, is you're going to be shooting at running deer. Is guys do like hunting with just a 12 gauge, 20 gauge lever action rifle, whatever, but iron sights. And it's funny because I've got with the crew that I hunt and do a lot of deer drives with on farmland, almost all of those guys, that's how they grew up hunting. They've almost never shot at a deer that was ever standing still. Like literally every deer they've ever killed has been a running deer. They don't know that there's such thing as shooting a deer when it's standing still. So that's just what they know. They use their 12 gauge with iron sights, and that's what they do. You step into that realm with a rifle, you can be pretty damn lethal if you're comfortable swinging on a deer and with a deer that's on the move. It's all what you're comfortable with. And I think the best thing that you can do practice-wise, and my brother and I are very fortunate because our father started us out very young with a 22 with a scope on it, and we would just shoot through boxes of ammunition. I mean, he would just set us there in the picnic table at camp, and we would just shoot. And that scope acquisition, picking up the target, getting comfortable with that, that's just something that it's just second nature. So you can pull your gun up and you can acquire that target. Now, if you're zoomed in, that's not a good situation. That burned Jimmy this year on a big buck. He had that deer came running straight at him, surprised him, and he had his scope zoomed into 9, and he couldn't even, all he could see was brown. He couldn't even see the body of the deer.
And I had that before in my past, and it was like, oh, okay, well, what would I have done, you know? And I've got a 12 gauge that I can drop down below the housing, and I can get on the iron sights. And it's like, okay, but I'm giving up the distance, but I can go back and forth between the two. And so it's like, you know, I don't know, just talking about that.
Yeah, and I typically don't. I keep my rifle, if I'm using my rifle deer hunting, I usually keep it at like 3 power, down about as low as I think I want to say I'm a 3x9 I think is my rifle scope. I usually keep it cranked all the way down, because if I'm in a situation where the deer's that far out, typically I'm going to have time to either I'm not going to have really an opportunity to shot, or I'm going to have time to dial it in. So I have made those mistakes. I have been burned. I don't run scope caps anymore because I burned myself on probably the biggest buck I've ever had a chance at. We were chasing it in PA. Bob had hit the buck. It appeared to be just a flesh wound, and the buck came up the side hill to me, and I had my scope caps down because it was snowing pretty hard, and I pulled my gun up, and I had black, those black Blizzard scope caps. Couldn't see nothing. So all it took is just me hitting the 2 buttons to flip them up, and by the time I flipped them up, the deer was gone. I could see him running, but he was intertwined with a bunch of does, and I had no shot. So I don't run scope caps anymore. I just run one of those neoprene covers that you can pull over your scope, and I'm just very conscious how I'm carrying my gun. If it's precipitating out, I try to keep it, carrying it flat to my side. I won't put it in a sling or in my gun bearer. I'll just, palm it and just carry it around. Or if I have to, I'll put that cover on it, because I don't want to get burned with that again. That's the worst.
Yeah, I mean, that having those situations I've had, and like you're saying, and your brother, it's, I don't know. You think about those things, especially like as I'm sort of like, one of the sentiments that I got from you in your intros this past fall was like, hey, there's still time. Hey, there's still time. Especially because you had always said, like, my comfort level is in the late season. My comfort level is in the firearm season. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna run with that in terms of like not putting that stress or pressure, or, the weeks are getting away, prioritize family, whatever. And so I'm shifting the scouting, like I said, directly for the next few weeks before turkey season, to sort of like, how can I facilitate this from a gun standpoint? Not that I don't care about the bow. I mean, I'll still check in on those spots, but I'm really trying to pick apart some of those pieces, like you said, and go back to them, right? And go back to them and figure out those nuances, especially if we do get maybe a late snow, which I don't think we will, but you never know.
Well, and that's where I think that's something for everyone to figure out, what part of the season is your part of the season that you excel at. And quite honestly, for me, I know it's gun season. I bet you if I was younger, before kids, if I was really this heavily into it at that point, maybe archery would have become more of a prime piece of my hunting success, I guess, or the times when I would have success. But right now, it's like my wife loves fall stuff, and I'm realizing that I need to come to terms with the fact that I can't hunt all the time in October. I need to save those days, because I would much rather be in the woods with a gun in my hand end of November and all through December. And now we got this holiday hunt. I just need every token that I can have in my pocket. And we all joke about that, but at the end of the day, I love my wife and I respect her, and I love my kids, and I want to be there with them too. So if there's nothing worse than those days where you're like, oh, you're watching the weather and it's like, oh, I got to be out this night. I got to be out. And nothing happens. You don't even see anything. And you're like, I just burned a night. There's a night away from the wife and kids that I just freaking wasted. And I would much rather take that night in October and move it to December 10th. And I've got my rifle and I've got an hour and a half, and I'm going to run down in this piece of public and hit those 2 glassing points and see if I can spot something. Like, I would much rather have that hunt than have that archery hunt in October. And when the kids are old enough to hunt, hopefully they like to hunt, and they're right there with me, and I don't have to feel guilty about it. But right now, you got to pick and choose your battles.
Yeah, and like that statement, like that like conclusive statement you made, that's not said or necessarily shared on the media that's out there, right? And as someone who's like relied on that to sort of advance my learning curve, if you will, it's a perspective that's really noteworthy, obviously, where we live. But then also, I mean, we all have kids, right? We work, things like that. We're married. So it resonates even more so than it probably would have in years past. And so it's something like I'm excited about in terms of how can I focus more on, like I said, that side of the tactics or the season versus what everybody typically focuses on from a media standpoint.
Yeah.
Not good or bad. It's just that's where the volume is. So
yeah, I don't know.
You don't hear that, so you don't think about that, especially if you're not in the circle like you and a lot of the guys in the chat probably are.
Yeah, agree. It's interesting. I don't know. It's got to be all about money, but there's just so much bow hunting content out there, and it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of people that want to talk about the beauties of gun hunting. But that's what we love, and I feel like we talk quite a bit about it on here. It's funny. Frank commented in there about his first buck, and it just reminded me of, I probably blacked this out so that I didn't remember this story, but my first deer was my first opening day of gun season up at camp, and my dad and I think it was my grandpa, Bill Harvey, dropped me off at my stand, half hour before light, my ladder stand, and he was hunting up on the side hill above me. He dropped me off. I had a 12 gauge 870 and maybe 2 boxes of Remington copper solids. That was the bullet at the time, and iron sights. And sure as shit, right at first light, up the gully in front of me comes this line of deer. I shot all 10 bullets I had, and I didn't hit anything. So my at this time there was no cell phones. It was two-way radios. So I two-way radioed to my grandpa, and he had to bring me down a box of slugs. And I ended up shooting a deer. It was my first deer. I ended up shooting it mid-morning. It was real foggy, and I shot that deer. It was not a far shot, but I hit it low right across the bottom of the brisket, and it was the most gruesome thing that I've ever seen to this day in my hunting career. And I'm very happy that it didn't break me, and not, because I've seen that happen where somebody's first experience is not a good one, and it turns you completely off to hunting because it's difficult to see the animal suffer. But it went right across the bottom of the brisket, opened it up, and the deer literally ran by me with its innards falling out. And it fell down in the bottom of the valley and spun around in a circle, like making all kinds of, it was awful, like a bad experience. So I probably did just blank that out until Frank shared his story about his first buck. But my grandpa took me to Gander Mountain immediately that following Monday night, I believe it was, Monday or Tuesday night, and we bought a scope. And that scope is still on my 870 Express shotgun that I use to this day. And, I'm not going back to iron sights unless I absolutely have to.
So I'll one-up you because I know we're up on time, but this is a one-up. So I get dropped off at that wife's coworker's friends. He goes, go to the bottom of the bean field, go to the shooting shack. All right, cool. So I don't have any clothes, right? I'm just totally ill-prepared, whatever. This was in 2017. I got a 30-06 there, and I'm sitting in the shooting shack all day. And about 4:30, off to my left, comes my first buck, right? It was a 4 or 6 point, I don't know what it was. And so I put the rifle right up on the window, and I shoot. And obviously, like, I pulled the trigger and jumped up. You
weren't holding the gun down.
Well,
right? Is that what happened? The gun, you just had the gun laying on the sill?
Yeah. It was laying on that. And so I spined him, right? And the other guy who was hunting with me, who gave us access, is about our age, and he's like, God, I heard you shot. What happened? And I thought I dropped it. And then the thing starts trying to crawl away like this.
Yeah.
Middle of an open bean field. Wasn't going to go anywhere. Legs were gone right in the back. tore a hole through its back. He goes, well, go out there and shoot it. I'm calling him on the phone. I'm shaking. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? And he goes, go out there and shoot it. So I'm like walking up to it, and the eyes on the thing just get like this big. And you're like, oh man, this thing is like terrified, but it can't go anywhere. And of course, like I'm not thinking about the meat, and I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. I'm just like, okay, I gotta kill this thing. So obviously I shoot it, wasted like, I don't know, shoulder, backstrap up here, all the good stuff. But I mean, or hit him right here, whatever. And so I go back into the shooting shack, and then another doe runs out. And I didn't call him, and I just shot it. And that one I killed, dropped instantly. I'm like, this is awesome. This is awesome. And so that part of the state, central western North Carolina, their rut is like late October, Thanksgiving, or late November, Thanksgiving to December. So there was like this really nice rut in 6 Point, comes out and starts like messing with these deer that are in the field, like doesn't know what it is, jumping back. And I call him, I'm like, can I shoot another one? He's like, no. Because he knew what work we had ahead of us.
Right.
It would have been one of the nicest bucks I've ever seen or had a chance at shooting at. And he's like, no, don't shoot it. Now, he probably was managing it for himself, which is fine, whatever, it was his lease. But yeah, that didn't it didn't startle me, it didn't scare me, it didn't give me a bad feeling about it. You know, when I spined that buck and had to go finish it off, but that was the first one I took down, and that happened probably 15 minutes after each other. Boom, boom. And I'm like, this is easy, this is great. Like,
yeah,
so.
it's when those things happen, I mean, it's you're taking a life, you're killing an animal, and that's why I use a big gun. It's overkill, but 90% of the deer I shoot don't go anywhere with my gun, and I will knock on wood with that. Fortunate, but you know, I want lights out. I want it to end quick, because there's nothing worse than seeing the deer suffer. Just plain and simple, and that's the bottom line. You want to end it quickly. So it's good to air those stories out, because they bring back fond memories and, you know, make you kind of appreciate what you got and appreciate where you've gotten to. And a lot of times that's what decides your equipment is things like that. That'll pave the road for exactly how you go about this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Justin's PA buck, he's told me the story, but I guess it's only fair that you share that one to close us out, I suspect, because we all got to wrap it up. Yeah, that was an interesting story, wasn't it, Justin, in terms of how it went down?
Yeah. First buck ever I shot out of a 1920s oil shack out in the middle of the woods in PA. It was a rainy, terrible day again. I feel like I explain every PA story as just rainy, terrible, windy, cold days, but I happened to be sitting in a shack waiting to rain out. There's a few of them around this area, and had a buck come through. Same thing as Eric, gun on the windowsill, except I held my gun down. But I smacked this thing at about 25 yards in the shoulder and just blew the bones out of his shoulder. That thing came running around the back of this house. I come out the other side door and shot it as it was dragging its front leg across in front of me. I mean, them things are crazy. You alluded to how you like to shoot a big gun there, Billy. What do you shoot?
I have a 7 mag is what I shoot.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And
yeah, so I
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Same thing. I mean, I shoot 30-06. So, I mean, there's no doubt that it's a lot of gun for any deer that you're going to really get. It definitely will do the job. But them things are survivors is what they are. They survive cold winters. They survive the weather we have here. They survive hunters all year round. I mean, how many have you seen with existing wounds from old hunters? And when you hit these things and they don't go down, that is an experience in and of itself.
It is.
Trying to put that thing away.
It is. And it's once it's happened to you, you don't want it to happen again, and it will really sharpen you up and make you want to make sure whatever issues you got, you can work them out. And I mean, quite frankly, I've gone through that with the bow and kind of still am. I've got a lot of things to work out with my archery shooting. I'm way more confident with a gun. That's partially why I, feel like I go out there so confident, because I'm that confident with the weapon. Whereas, with archery equipment, sometimes it's like, what the hell is going on in my head? Because it's a mess. But going back to, it's all about the meat. And I think that's the thing that I'd like to close this out on is just, it's all about what your intent is. And that came up in my discussion with the crossbow guy, 2 conversations. We're recording this on the evening of the 23rd. And today I posted the Crossbow Coalition discussion, part 1 with Rick McDermott. And we talked about a lot of different things there. But then on part 2, which will be coming out tomorrow morning, the 24th, with my dad's best friend Joel, hearing kind of his personal perspective on the whole crossbow situation and how that could impact his life in a positive way because of his situations. But at the end of the, we got into some great discussion in both of those podcasts, is that it's whatever this hunting thing, it's whatever you want it to be as a person. I think too often we all start fighting with each other about, what weapon or how do you do it, or is it fair chase or not. If you're following the book, if you're following the laws as they're written, you're hunting within legal hours, you're using weapons that they say you can use, who cares? And that's how I feel about it. As long as we're all, going in the right direction and pulling the boat and not trying to poke holes in it. We know there's certainly people out there that are doing that, and we need to police those. And if they're in our social circles, try to politely direct them that that's not the right way to do these things. But, our family, our approach is always been central around the end of the season and that meat that you have, that you've brought home, that you can eat and feed your family with and friends and everybody else. So that's where our ethics come from. That's where our priorities come from. But with others it may be different, and that's your prerogative. But we're out here to have fun, make memories, fill the freezer, maybe shoot a good buck or 2. But there's nothing better than stacking up does, and that's something we need to continue to pound home. Is that if people like to eat venison, shoot yourself some does. You don't have to go out there and shoot a buck for venison. It's not necessary. Now, if you have one day to hunt a year, and all you're going to do is shoot the first deer that comes by, it's not my duty to tell you whether that's right or wrong. That's your decision, what you want to shoot. But if you've got the time and you can go shoot a few does, do that, and then wait to pull the trigger on a buck, because that venison's just as delicious in that doe as it is out of that buck.
I think that's a great point, man. It is all about the meat. Don't be afraid to, talk to other hunters that have different philosophies than you, because that's something that me and Eric, I think that's one of the reasons we get along so well, is our mentalities in the woods are not the same. We have the same general goal, and that is to get the meat, fill the freezer, but the way we go about it is totally different. And I think that's what brings us a little bit closer together, because like what the 3 of us are doing right now, it's great to bounce ideas or thoughts or where we should go or how you should progress with those other people, because you're not formed as a hunter from one input. It's a lot of other people's inputs.
That's life, ain't it? If you can talk to people about things that you may not be coming from the same point, but try to figure out where you are, and probably most of the time you're not too far off from each other. I think that's
absolutely.
Hunting's a unique thing because we all are here for the same reasons, but not all hunters view all things in life the same way. And that's, like I said in the intro to today's episode, that with the coalition, it dawned on me that it's like, well, I'm taking this firm stance here on my belief of the whole crossbow position of things, but I know that there's a position from a lot of bow hunters out there that's adverse to that. I'd love to talk about it with somebody who is steadfast against it, just to understand it, because I think we have to have those discussions. We have to be open to that, and we don't have to argue about it. We can just share our perspectives, make our points, and we can still be friends, because at the end of the day, we're all still hunters. We're all still Americans. We're all still whatever label you want to give yourself. That's who we are. It's what we are. And conversation is very important in all things, man.
Well,
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, man, that was fun. That was a good time.
It was fun.
It was
I feel like
a fun little rabbit hole. Answered a lot of questions. So
yeah,
see if we can't rub 2 sticks together and figure out something this weekend.
Yeah, man. Just go walk and have fun. And and I want to do I kind of skirted your gear question, but that's something I need to prioritize because there's a lot of stuff gear-wise that I'd love to talk about. So maybe we could, we'll get back on that at some point.
Yeah, I know some guys, and teaches their own, and they can be gear nuts. For me, the questions in general were just like, what is functional?
Yeah.
And that's cool if you're gear nut. That's awesome. It's fun. It's neat.
I guess
But
you could say,
it's not my thing.
yeah, I guess you could say that I was a gear nut for maybe like 3-4 years because I was building a system that I was comfortable with. Now that I have the system, yeah, I might buy a thing here or there, but I just, like the guys at G3D, they make fun of me. Like I don't, those guys in the field staff, they literally will talk 12 months out of the year about gear and equipment. And it's like,
yeah.
It's just not at the top of my priority list. It's like, does my gun work? Does my bow shoot straight? Does my clothing fit me? Will it go in my back? Like, I'm just not concerned about if I can add a little piece to my set. So, yeah, not to open that can of worms, but agreed. I think there needs to be more discussion about the functional side of gear and equipment, not so much the, bells and whistles and got to have this. There's so much marketing involved in hunting nowadays that, Kevin with the Deer Hunter podcast, last week with the Kip folks who's with, working on the whole thing with Origin. I'm fired up to see what Origin comes out with. It's not going to really be any different than the clothing that I'm currently wearing. I'm totally behind it because it's made in America and I may end up buying some of it, but all these pieces, as long as you figure out how they work and how you want to use them, it doesn't matter what you're using. Just put that set together and make it work. But let's pack it in. I'm freaking whooped.
Good deal.
Have a good night, fellas.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks for having us on, Billy.
Go enjoy your 19 men, Justin.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll send some videos from Turkey Woods tomorrow. So we'll see what I find.
Okay, sounds good.
Find
a bunch of bearded hens, would you?
Yeah, I'll see you.
Yeah.
All right. See you, boys. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for everybody for being here with us tonight. Gabe fading them.